Hey, what's up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. And today we have a special treat for you. We are with Mrs. Barbara Ennis. What is going on, Barbara? How are you today?
Great. I'm doing really great. Very excited about the future and look forward to this podcast interview. Thanks, David.
Yeah, amen. Thank you for being here and investing the time with us. This is a important conversation that we're having, and I'm excited to have it with you. Now, just tell people a little bit about who you are. You are the world's leading corporate gender specialist. You believe that men and women don't appreciate, understand each other because they don't appreciate the different ways men and women relate, communicate, problem solve, and make decisions. You have multiple books that explain, how to communicate better overall. And you have two books. I have one here that you wrote with John Gray, which is called Work With Me. And then your other book, Gender Intelligence. You have multiple TED Talks on the topic, and you are just the subject matter expert on this gender intelligence. So thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Yes, absolutely.
And appreciate, hopefully I didn't butcher your bio too much. That's what I grabbed off of social. So what else did you want to say? Anything else that I missed in that short introduction? Because there's so much more, obviously.
Yeah, other than I've been at it for 30 years and I've written 5 books, and I have an upcoming book coming on women in leadership and how women leaders are impacting the world and transforming the world. So I'm excited about that. And then I have an upcoming documentary called The Missing Piece, which is really about the fact that we're missing understanding that men and women are wired differently. And it's a good thing. And once we have the eyes to see it, we actually can see the benefit of that. So I'm sure we'll get into that more so in the podcast. So, but that's it for me for now. Thank you.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you for that. And listen, 30 years. I didn't know you had 5 books, so that's congratulations. And yeah, I've had the opportunity to reading Gender Intelligence. I've went through that. I read that one, listened to it on Audible, and now I'm into Work With Me, this book I'm holding, which is also fascinating. And I'll tell you what really I think was compelling to me is the fact that I have 3 daughters, a wife. I grew up without a father, so only my mother. So I've been around women my whole life. And then ironically, I think I told you this when we first spoke, that, if I look at my clients, 70% of them have been women. So it's just interesting, whatever that means. But it's so talk to us. Tell us about what is gender intelligence? We'll start there.
Yeah. So, I coined the term gender intelligence when 30 years ago, when everybody was talking about gender equality. And I realized that gender equality, it quotes a game, like a numbers game. We have to have a certain representation of women or fighting for equality versus standing for gender intelligence. So there's a different context when you look at gender equality versus gender intelligence. And when I did that, most CEOs were men. They said, who wouldn't want to be gender intelligent, right? So they engaged in this learning, in a very big way. And their insights, and I know you have had that too. I think we texted yesterday or the day before. Insights start first in their personal lives, where they begin to say, oh, I had no idea that my wife or my partner or my daughters, were wired differently, but I can totally see how it plays out. And I was just kind of putting up with it or not sure, trying to fix it or whatever, right? Versus really recognize that that's just the way she looks at things, she looks at it that way, you look at it this way, and we have the best solutions when we can really look at these differences and appreciate them. So that's really where I'm coming from with it. And we have many, many companies who have really benefited from that and have benefited in the areas, innovative thinking, acceleration of results, especially in consumer market, because 85% of consumer spending is done by women, right? So wouldn't you want to understand that market, right? And the fact that women value different things in the experience of the relationship and the sales cycle and all of that is an important thing to be aware of. So we've had many clients like American Express, Deloitte, IBM, I mean, a lot of tech companies. We're right now working with mining companies and manufacturing. So we've been, from financial services all the way to manufacturing and mining companies. So it's been very vast all over the world. So
Yeah, I'm glad you shared some of your client list, because those are some pretty serious companies that you work with. And what would you say? I mean, when you go into these companies like Duluth, American Express, companies what, like they all, like, what is like the first thing that you kind of see? Because a lot of these companies, they kind of think they have their stuff together, right? With the
Yep.
the diversity and stuff like that. But what would you say is one of the first challenges you see?
So two top challenges that companies even today are experiencing is one is they're really good at recruiting. So they're doing a great job at recruiting women and diverse candidates. They have a better results in retaining diverse candidates, but retaining women, they're not doing that well, and advancing women. So people like Deloitte, companies like Deloitte, American Express, PwC, and others will say things like, we've been at this for a long time. Why haven't we made progress? Right? So, and they make some assumptions that women leave because of work-life balance reasons, which is so not the case, right? There are very different reasons why women leave. And once they recognize that, they get super curious about the why behind it and about how to solve it, right? So there's a real open-mindedness around it, saying there's something we don't know that we don't know, right? That we need to understand. And then they dig deep into the neuroscience of differences and really understand, what women value and how they can accelerate that.
So, and I'll go back to what you said earlier, like, the insights I'm getting, I guess, from the differences in my wife and I, and how we think, and so, how we argue sometimes, and like the things she says to me, it just doesn't make sense. But the more I understand, like for her, everything, and trying to say this the right way, like it's like focusing on the past, right? It's like a lot of it's like, well, you did this is what happened, and she's stuck there a lot, and I'm just like, we just got to move on. Like, you gotta, and you see this a lot, right? In not just in the personal, but in like the boardrooms, right? Like, but like, how common is it that, people, this is where these corporations are, these industries, even couples like myself, like you said, for me, I'm starting to see it in my own relationship. Like, I've seen it for years. I just never could put my finger on why it was happening.
Yeah. So we can go into a little bit about the brain. And for those who haven't seen my TED Talk, please watch that, because I do a deep dive on brain differences. One thing is that the hippocampus, which is the memory center to the brain, is larger and more connected in women. So women remember things, especially relational memories. Like, I remember when we went on this trip and we went to this restaurant, and the server was rude to this couple that was sitting further down. And in a male brain, that doesn't retain itself as much. Men can have brilliant memory, but it tends to be more transactional or factual memory versus relational. So that's one thing. Now, there's equal learning for both men and women, and sometimes women do get stuck in the past, right? When maybe it's time to just let it go. Like, say what you have to say and then let it go. I have that too. I tend to remember things, but I say to myself, is it useful for me to bring this up today, or is it pretty much resolved for me? And if it is, I just let it go, right? In the boardroom, however, women can identify patterns, right? Women can say things like, guys, we've tried this before, and men will say, yeah, but that was 5 years ago. We should give it another shot, right? And there's some intelligence that women can bring from their memory banks, right? To say, if we're going to do that, let's avoid these 3 things, kind of thing. If that gets dismissed, it may create blind spots in whatever the initiative is or the project they want to take on. Right?
And from reading the books, that's pretty common, that it will get dismissed, right? Like, yep. Men that are in leadership, higher leadership, a lot of times will just say, no, let's just focus on this and just keep moving forward, right? Is that common, and why is it important that we fix that?
Yeah. So there are two kind of thought processes, right? Men tend to use convergent thinking. Let's converge on the problem, look at the pros and the cons. Speed is important. Let's make the decision really fast, kind of thing. And women tend to use divergent thinking. And what that means is, how does this implicate over here, over here, over here, right? And often men are blind to that. Once they understand the neuroscience, they seek out women's insights on that. So they can see potential pitfalls if they make this decision. An example that just happened literally yesterday in the Karma Club with Dr. Francine Hadaway, I was talking about this convergent versus divergent. And she said to me, oh, that happened at Intel when I was working with Intel. Intel had this thing called kill the deal, which happened at other companies too, where they'll take a new idea and try it out for 3 months. And she said, I kept saying to them, it's never going to work in 3 months. It's going to take at least a year. Why are you killing the deal or the project in three months, right? And I shared with her that happened in a workshop at American Express, in the headquarters in New York, where we were in a marketing workshop, and there were 3 women, the rest were men, 17 men. And the 3 women brought this up and wrote on a flip chart and said, it's too short-term thinking. And then they used the example of these 4 projects that they'd taken on that they dropped in 3 months. And the men heard it, understood it, and said, okay, let's put them back on the table and let's try it for a year. 3 of those were the biggest successes at American Express ever, right? So that combination of that men and women working and winning together can be very powerful once you have the eyes to see it. But it's key is to have the eyes to see it.
And what would you say are the the percentage of these organizations, these companies that are actually do have the right, I guess the right mix of leadership in place that it's working for? Is it a low percentage? Is it growing?
It's growing. It's low. It's around 20%. We have a
20?
long way to go. And of course, since the pandemic, we have another challenge in corporate is that women have left organizations or pivoted into something else. So there's a big focus on figuring that out and recruiting more women.
And why have they left?
This is interesting. We did 82 focus groups with women asking that question, and we found a couple of things. One was that there was no longer an emotional connection to the brand or the company. They felt disconnected to that and over-zoomed, like burnout, fatigue, virtual. Women need high-touch experiences more than men. Men can be transactional in front of a computer and then stop working and for the evening or whatever and be fine about it. There's something missing for women. So one of the themes that came up was this emotional connection and also a connection to the company. Is this company really making an impact in the world, or are they only interested in selling more widgets, right? And of course, generationally, we see the younger generation also having that value set, right? Where they want to make an impact in the world. They don't just want to work for a bank or a technology company. They want a bank and a technology company that's up to something bigger than just selling and growing in terms of money, right?
Yeah, and something that stood out to me and is in the book is me as a guy, as a man, right? I'm like focused on the goal, like the outcome, like the result, like got to get the result. And then as I read more into this, though, the women's brain, I guess, is more. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's more like they want to be appreciated for like the whole process, right? And a lot of men, we don't really think that is that accurate? Like we don't just. It's not really how we operate, and there's like a disconnect. Yeah.
There are some fun. It's not all women, all men, but certainly we talk about 80% kind of thing versus 20. That women tend to value the journey to get to the destination. It doesn't mean they don't want the results. Women want results, no kidding. But how am I experiencing? What kind of experience am I having in the journey to get to the results? And men often will work with a boss they don't particularly like and be fine about it, right? Or whether the experience isn't that great as long as they achieve that thing, that goal, right? So it really shifts for women in this thing. And I hear often women will say, when we've done actually, I'll just tell you recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had a woman who had been with this big bank, North American bank, for 28 years. And she said to me, since the workshop, that we did with the senior management, this is the first time I truly feel valued. Can you imagine? 28 years, she now feels valued. And then she went and she said, and the sad news is that it took 20 years for me to experience that. I said, you know what, Sandra, don't think about the 28 years. Just appreciate that it's happening now,
Yeah.
that you can live that into the future and really experience it. And I said, can you give me an example of what you're seeing? She said, the men are seeking my opinion. They're seeking my point of view. They're valuing it. They're integrating it into the decision making. And I just feel like I'm a massive contributor now, and not just having a seat at the table, but actually contributing to everything. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, it is cool. I was telling you how, I was trained as a trainer by a lady named Antoinette Perez, who was master faculty for Keller Williams. And then I was even thinking back further, like when I first went to work for a publishing company, the manager's name was Kristen Rowan, and she's the one who taught me really, like, not all sales, but she taught me like selling advertising. So it's just another. I just keep seeing all these places in my life where I've been trained by women and been around women. It's just, I find it interesting where, again, just because of my clients tend to be women. Something in a couple of things in this book that really stood out to me that I want to bring up, and then I want to open it up to questions. The story of I'm trying to remember it exactly, but I don't remember the names, but she was working with a CEO, and there was a lot of pressure, and then she had taken, I think she took a week off or a weekend off, or she wanted some time off to be with her son that was going through a medical procedure. And then the boss, I can't remember the names of the people in the book now. I should have highlighted it, but I remember the story because he called her on the weekend, and he was just calling her in excitement because he had a project he was working on, but she asked for the time off and she expected it, but yet he called her. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I can relate to this, because I've done this, right? And I'm just calling like, oh, hey, I need to know can you help me with something? Can we? And so when he called her, he never even asked her about her son. Do you remember the? I'm sure you remember the story because you wrote the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was really upset by that. He didn't know anything about it, and then she resigned not long after that.
Yeah.
Right.
It was really interesting, and he was a really good guy.
Yeah, that's what it said.
Really, really great guy. And she misinterpreted his intentions, right? His intention was to connect and share some good news and have her participate in the good news. And how it landed for her was, wait a minute, this is sacred time for me with my son, right? And you're intruding in that and checking up on me or something, and that's not workable for me. And then she, of course, her hippocampus kicked in her memory, and she remembered earlier similar situations that happened in the past, which then caused her to say, I just don't want to work here, And she had a memory of a time when she had a newborn child, and they had this motto called all hands on deck. So if you were a VP level or above, if there's a breakdown, everybody had to jump on it. Everybody, which is a mistake in itself, but that's how they operated, right? And she remember her newborn was 2 weeks old, and she had to fly from West Coast to East Coast, and leave her baby that she was breastfeeding. You know what I mean? So she remembered that as well, and all of that kind of accumulated into her deciding, I got to get out of here and just take care of my son for a while, and then I'll find a CEO who cares. And he cared, but it was just a classic misinterpretation of intentions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like, yeah, because I can relate, because I and similar in the past done that. Excited, I'm happy to pay you for the weekend. You know what I mean? They just want to be disconnected. So just this, and then I want to get into some questions. So there's another, it said in multiple times, women often sense that they have to work harder than men do to prove themselves, and they feel doubted for their commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that.
Yeah. So there tends to be a norm, a perception, men. So if you look around promotion, for example, men tend to get promoted based on their potential. Like David, love David. He's great. I know him really well. He's got a huge future in this company. And then they'll look at Barbara and they'll say, she needs a little more experience in the pipeline, in the trenches or something. You know what I mean? So men get promoted based on the potential. Women get promoted based on what they've done. So there's that added scrutiny. And women feel that. So then they assume this, what I call pitfall that women fall into, is the loyalty trap. I just have to work long enough, hard enough to get noticed, right? And I often say to women, you won't get noticed. You'll just become indispensable, right? So make sure that you share your accomplishments. I know often for women and women of different cultures, that's a challenge, you know, to blow your own horn kind of thing, which is a natural thing for men to do. So women tend to feel that they just have to work harder to get there. And you hear a lot of women, you know, in senior positions saying, oh my God, I put in so many hours while they were golfing or something, you know? So yeah, it's definitely out there.
All right. I'm going to move over to Clubhouse for a few questions. If you guys have a question on the stage, just give me a mic flash and I will come right to you. Let's see. Do we have any flashes? Okay. Well, actually, Jackie does. So Jackie, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks so much. You know, for the future with AI, with everything coming in and the impact on jobs, how do you see that impacting the gender balances going forward?
Jackie, thank you for asking that question. It's a big, big question, right? But I'll answer it in two ways. One is that AI is, and if you want, you can check out Dr. Baron Cohen. He's done a study on 500,000 brains, and he looked at extreme male brains, so alpha male brains, and female brains. And he looked at male brains in Silicon Valley are mostly about systemizing, right? Systemizing. AI is a lot about systemizing. And women engineers more about empathizing, right? And I think in AI, and I see it because I'm in it, that there is a holdback to say, wait a minute, let's not launch this. We need to have that empathy piece into it. So that's one thing I would say about that. Second, there's some beautiful things about AI. And I saw a demo of Microsoft's new pilot demo. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to help women so much, especially working women with children. You know, they don't have to actually attend the meeting. They actually get a summary of the meeting. And then they get like in real time, you know what I mean? And then they get a condensed summary and then questions to ask that wasn't being addressed. I mean, how cool is that? You know, so that automation is going to be freeing for a lot of women and men, of course, too, but in particular, women who are raising young children and so on. So there's some gold there. And then we really got to watch out for, you know, making it too systemized, ritualistic way and not having that empathizing incorporated into it. That's how I would answer that. Thanks, Jackie. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, that was very useful. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate the question. Great question. Christine, I see you flashing.
Yes, it's nice to be here today. A very interesting topic, and I don't think I've ever met you, Barbara. But I find it's
Christine, you seem like you're really either close to your microphone or something's going on. There's like a lot of feedback.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Well, I was just about to ask Barbara. I'm new in the entrepreneurial world. I've been a nurse for 36 years, so I'm branching off into going into my own brand, own business. I wanted to know if you could elaborate on ways in which understanding and embracing the gender intelligence and contribute to fostering innovation and driving success within the entrepreneurial world when it comes to this topic. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Great, great question. So one thing, and I've done a lot of research on women entrepreneurs and men entrepreneurs. One thing that women tend to fall into, and probably part of being a nurse for that long this might relate to you or be relatable, is that women network for connections. So what I mean by that is they network in the entrepreneurial world for people that resonate for them, right? And sometimes that's not going to advance what you are doing. You'll have great relationships, right? You'll spend a lot of time with people, men and women, but it might not advance your entrepreneurial, strategy. So there's a great book out there that I recommend you read by Dan Solomon, and it's called It's Not How, It's Who. And basically what it says is that often what we spend too much time working in our business versus on our business. And also we spend too much time with people who aren't necessarily experts, right? So he said, go after the who in the world, who've already done it, who've already mastered it, where you can learn from, or the who in the world who have huge, deep networks and connections that you could capitalize on, and spend less time on the how, the learning. I got to learn everything, because as women, we think we need to learn everything. And so that's one thing. Second, and I know it's taking long, but I think it would be really useful. Work on your unique abilities. And David, you know all about this with Strategic Coach, right?
Mhm.
Work on your unique abilities. Don't work on what you're competent at. So I'll give you an example of this. I'm very, very competent micromanaging, but it sucks the living daylights out of me, right? I just can't. I don't like it. I don't want to do it, and then I have somebody in the team who loves it. Like it's their unique ability. It energizes them. So make sure that you have that. And there's a great tool, David, you know it as well, called Kolbe, KOLBE.com, where you can really create a unique ability team as you expand your business, right? Where you have that kind of team where you can throw things that really don't work for you to focus on, and you stay in your lane where you are in your power lane, right? Your unique ability lane. So I hope that was useful.
Oh, that was so helpful, Barbara. Thank you so much. What was the author of that book again?
Dan Solomon.
And the book is called Who Not How.
Yeah.
Who Not How is the title. Yeah, great,
Yeah.
unbelievable book. I actually was I've only done like 3 book clubs in my life, and one of them was on that book.
Yeah.
It's that
fantastic.
good of a book. Yeah.
It's the best. Yeah. Mhm.
All right, awesome. Do we have any more questions? We got time for one more. If anybody has one, and if not, then I will. Okay, cool. All right. Well, so Barbara, talk about the differences. Well, because see what I'm picking up on is that as men and women are so different, and they think different, and they approach the way they go after projects and targets different. People tend to see that as weaknesses, but you're actually seeing the strengths as I'm seeing them as strengths, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, there's extraordinary strengths between men and women. And if you can just imagine that, when you look at just the simple concept of convergent thinking versus divergent, if you have that combination, you appreciate them saying, I see it. He looks at it this way. There's richness in how he's doing it, right? And there's richness. She actually, and this is something that CEOs, and I know hundreds of CEOs who says, she's the dot connector. And what that means is that she connects the dots for me where I typically wouldn't go, right? I would have a blind spot. I don't connect it that big, right? So women are visionary, big thinkers, and they have this divergent. So when you make a decision, say in sales department, women sometimes will say, well, how does that impact the staff in marketing? Or how does it impact over here, right? So there's that more connection thing. And that's what CEOs truly, truly value. And what I would leave women to understand is, and there's a really good book out right now by Dr. Luann Brinson-Dean, Female Brain, and it's called The Upgrade. It talks about women's brains differences, but also how as we age, we actually get even bigger superpowers, right? And one superpower we have is called the insula, which is in the brain, which is the intuitive brain. So and I don't know how many women are listening to this, but I'll ask you this question. How many times have you ever had an intuition and then you say, yeah, that's okay, and you've ignored it? And then maybe years later or a few months later, whatever, you look back and you go, oh my God, I knew that all along. It wasn't going to work out, right? Trust that intuition. And for the men who are listening, if you hear women say, I'm not sure about this, or I don't have a good feeling about this, probe a little deeper, because there might be something there. There's some intelligence that you might not have connected to that will influence, the decision that you're about to make, or the action that you're about to take. That's the combination of the win-win strengths between men and women that I advocate for, and will do for the rest of my life.
So I feel like sometimes I have that. I said it the other day, joking around. I'm like, my woman's intuition is kicking in.
Yeah.
But so I feel like we have it. We just sometimes ignore it. At least some men, right? Like is that accurate?
Totally. Men have gut feelings. Absolutely. What is interesting, the difference between that with women is that women take more into it. So for example, women tend to read facial expressions and the meta message, or how people are saying something, right? For example, really simple, if you say to a person, how are you? And he or she says, I'm fine. Women can detect what kind of fine it is. And that's very hard for men. Men will hear fine and they'll go, okay, great, move on. Next topic, right? And women go, no, there's something going on here. I'm going to check in a little bit more, saying, mean by fine, right? So there's that. And, I see, for example, in lawyers, male, female lawyers, when they're interviewing witnesses, the female lawyer is so interesting how the men will go off the law book, the questions, linear, A, B, C, D, which is all brilliant stuff, right? She'll say, I think I'm going to ask a slightly different question because I'm reading this witness, a facial expression, and there's something going on. I'm going to probe a little deeper. And that combination is what we're looking for. And that's the evidence we have out there, So I really, the best way you can do it is just practice it. Check it out. Just check it out. Practice it, and watch my TED Talk or listen to the podcast, genderintelligenceshow.com, or read my books. But you don't need a lot of knowledge. As you know, David, you can read a book and boom, it just opens up, right? You begin to see things that you haven't seen before, right?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, well, here's a question. I'm not even gonna go there, but I've never asked you about this, but I think I asked Woody about this when I talked to Woody. What about how the LGBTQ community, how is that impacting this whole space, right? Or is it?
Well, not in my world, but then also because we have such insurmountable research, right? And we were working with neuroscience forever. So it's really, what I do want to say about it is that when we started studying, and we didn't study the female brain until 1990, for God's sakes, right? Before that, we assumed that men and women were more or less the same, right? And then we saw, as you'll see my TED Talk, there was a big explosion of research simply because the medical community was misinterpreting women's health and misdiagnosing women, such as heart attacks, etc. But what is beautiful about it is that when we started embarking on this gender difference, then the question was, are there any other differences? What about the gay brain? And then Sweden, Netherlands, Germany, US began to examine that. Now, there's not enough data to really make some huge assumptions around it, but we're creating an opening to research more of that. And I think that's a beautiful thing that this gender lens has created, is to look deeper, even deeper in that world.
All right. So for people listening, what's the best way? I know you've mentioned your TED Talk a couple of times. You have your books. What would be the best way for them to either, get in touch with you if they want to attend one of your workshops, or just get some one of your books or your TED Talk? Is there a place where everything is located, or what's the best way to do that?
You could go on my website, which is genderintelligence.com. And if you want to contact me, there's a click, say contact, and just click on that and you will be in touch with me.
All right. Awesome. And then, so genderintelligence.com. Yeah, you have a great website. I'm going to share my takeaway with you. And I shared it with you the other day is when people, like, what I got from the gender intelligent thing is, like, when people become more gender intelligent, what happens is they start to understand and accept the differences. Like for my wife and I, right? Like, I don't agree with a lot of stuff. But at the same time, as I start to understand this more, I start to accept it, and it starts to be okay, as opposed to, she doesn't have to be wrong. Right. Yeah. And I think she needs to read some of your books too, so she can not make me wrong as much. But hey, it starts somewhere, right? But it's not about making them wrong, right? It's about awareness. It's about acceptance. it's about working together.
Yeah, it's not about blame. It's about understanding, right? And appreciating the differences, right? And let's stop the blame game. And we've been in that world for too long. Let's honor our differences and love each other for the way that you are and the way that you're not, right? And have that level of acceptance and understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say, if all of us right now, there was one, like you'd say, hey, I want you to do one thing, like this is the thing you need to do to get, I'll just use better, because I can't think of another word, to get better in this area. What would you say to everybody?
The only way that I've seen when we can stop misinterpreting each other is to two things: make no assumptions and stand in the other person's shoes and listen, listen, listen. Try that.
So two things you said: make no assumptions.
Stand in the other person's shoes and listen. Listen, not with your filter, but listen.
So how does somebody make no assumptions? Because aren't we just like always assuming machines anyway? Is that normally
You
happening?
can literally hit the pause. You just have to
Yeah.
build that muscle a little bit, right? Because we live in a world of assumptions, absolutely. But if you can just pause and exercise that learning agility and say, okay, let me really listen to David, right? Where is he really coming from? So I'm not misinterpreting where he's coming from, right? And I'm being defensive or whatever, right?
Can you give us a tip? Give us a tip for how to listen better.
So the tip would be, first of all, you and your wife or a partner or a colleague, female colleague, it's not just to say, how are you? You know what I mean? But say, how are you really? And listen, how are you really?
Well, that's strong.
Because yeah, it's so strong because we tend to say, how are you? Fine, fine. We move on, right? But there's so much, there might be so much going on that, see, here's the thing. This is about people. And there's nothing that pains people more not to be heard and understood, right? And to be heard and understood is the most freeing and validating thing in the world. The best. Doesn't mean you have to make them right or wrong, but you heard them and you understood, right? Yeah, I think we've sewn this one up.
All right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks again for being on the show, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
All right. Thank you so much. All the best to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And by the way, thank you guys, everybody on Clubhouse. We appreciate you guys being here as well. And thank you, Christine and Jackie and Christopher and everybody else that's here for your great questions. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the podcast. And make sure you go check out Barbara. And it's genderintelligent.com.